Hello again everyone, and welcome to another edition of Enjoy Beekeeping. It's the middle of winter, and for those of you who have long winters, there's really not a whole lot you can do in regards to beekeeping except maybe work in the wood shop and get some frames built, get supers built for the next year. So a lot of prep for the coming year. But this is why I really enjoy my observation beehive. So I want to talk to you today a little bit more about why this is such a valuable tool to have as a beekeeper. So as I mentioned, at the time of the shooting of this video, it's the middle of winter. And it's so cool to have an observation beehive because you can always take a look and see what the bees are up to without disturbing them at any time, day or night. You'll find that bees really don't sleep either. So even if you can't sleep at night and you want to come down and check them out, a lot of times you'll see them working, but there's really not a whole lot of activity going on right now because it is quite cold even here in North Georgia. In fact, we had our first snow in about 3 years just last week. So you can see in the pictures here some of the bees, the beehives that were out in the field and in different spots on the property. We got a pretty good dusting of snow, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe 2 inches. So the bees are all hunkered down, just waiting it out. And you'll take a look inside this observation beehive. Oh, and by the way, we just moved this in from the workshop. A lot of times when you watch my videos, you probably remember seeing this in the background of the bee barn, where I'm always building frames or doing some kind of instructional. You always saw the observation beehive off to the background. Well, we had a project coming up where we needed to do some spray painting in the shop. And so I really didn't want the bees to be out there with the fumes because the smell is really quite strong. And I didn't know if it would even be fatal to the bees, so we decided it would be better to get them out of the shop. And winter's a perfect time to move bees, as long as you do it carefully where you don't bounce them and break the cluster that's trying to keep warm. So we just gently packed them up, took them back into the house. This is where we would normally do a lot of our beekeeping classes. This is down in my basement, and it's kind of cool down here. We really don't heat and cool this space, but it always seems to maintain a pretty even temperature. In the wintertime, it's probably about 55, 60 degrees down here. It doesn't get super cold, but it doesn't really get that warm either. And I've got them installed, and it didn't take me very long to do it all. And they're in that same exact window location, so instead of punching a hole in the wall, I just open the window and I put a board to fit so that they can exit and enter real easy from their clear tube that I use. Again, if you look inside of what's going on, there's really not a whole lot going on. You see a ton of empty comb, and at first glance you might even wonder if this is a dead out. Did the bees just all die off? Well, if you look on the other side, towards the top, all the bees have worked their way up. They've eaten through most of the honey as well. There's just a tiny bit of honey, and when I picked it up, I could actually feel that it did have some substantial weight to it still. So it was quite heavy, and the thing that you have to keep in mind about the observation beehives that I build, they're not show and tell hives. They're meant to house your bees 24/7, 365 days a year. This particular one is the old model that I used to build. This is a 15 medium frame observation beehive. The one that I build now is a 9 frame deep observation beehive. And when I say mediums and deeps, I'm talking about Langstroth frames. So the new one holds 9 deep Langstroth frames. So the volume is very close to what they would get if they were living in a 10 frame deep, which is a lot like what bees are looking for in the wild. When they're trying to scout a new location, that's about the volume that they're looking for, about a 10-gallon volume. So they can live in that space all year round. You don't have to worry about going in and making splits, harvesting honey. This is strictly a learning tool. And so one of the things about the genetics of this particular species of bee there's European honeybees, right? So you have Italian, you have Russian, you have Carniolan, German. So the bees that I get here are usually bees that I catch. Some of them are wild, and some of them might come from other beekeepers. I'm not 100% sure in every single case, except where I do see a bee tree. Now, I've gotten several out of bee trees. People have cut them down and called me to remove them, so I know that these were wild bees. This particular colony is a colony that I got about 2 years ago from a cabin cutout up in the Blue Ridge Mountain area. I had a friend of a friend call me, and they had bees in their wall, and they were setting up shop, and he asked if he knew anybody that could get the bees out of his house. It was actually a log cabin. So if you go back in the archives on my channel, you'll see that original cutout. So this is I think it's the 3rd generation queen that's in here now. It's not the original queen. She swarmed out last summer, and then 2 additional swarms were cast, and I'll be putting some of that video content up after I get it edited, because that was some pretty cool stuff. But this is the 3rd daughter from that original queen. And so she's in here, and the reason why I know she's still here is because here in Georgia, we don't get really super cold for too long, and every time it warms up, the bees will go out and they'll forage and they will bring in pollen. Now, they only do this if they're going to raise babies or if they're in the brood rearing stage. Now, there's not a lot of brood rearing going on in January. At the time of this video, it's actually January 22nd. So there's not a whole lot going on, but there's always just a little bit of brood that's being reared. And every time it gets warm, the bees will go out and they bring in pollen. Now, they wouldn't do this if they didn't have a queen and there was larvae in different stages. So that's how you can tell without going inside to find out what's really going on. Because again, when you look through the glass, there's not a whole lot of activity. And so if you're really not watching for those other telltale signs on the warm days of pollen coming in, you might assume that this colony just collapsed and died, when in fact it didn't. And keep in mind that there's 3 frames on every level. So the bees are smart enough to know that in order to keep warm, they have to go on the inside. Again, not a lot of activity. The bees are up working towards the top. And they're really not doing a whole lot as far as work goes. It's very minimal right now. There's a labor shortage. So you've probably heard about the labor shortage. Well, they're having one too right now. So the labor shortage that's affected this entire observation beehive has resulted in a lot of garbage laying at the bottom of the floor. You'll see some dead bees and bee debris, that's what I call that, all down on the floor. And as soon as this population gets up in numbers and we've got a lot of workers again, you're going to see them clean that floor nice and clean, just like it was brand new. A few things too I want to mention to you about having an observation beehive. So the thing that I mentioned before was the genetics. So there's several genetics in the bees that I have. I don't think that they're pure Italian or Russian, but I think they have some of the characteristics of the Russian bees. And the reason why I say that is because the cluster, now this is the second winter that I've had this colony of bees, and every winter so far, it's gotten down to literally a handful of bees, or at least that's what it appears to be. Now, the reason I know that there's probably a bigger cluster in this hive than there was last year is I've got a top screen up here. I'll show you my other one that I've got. This is a cover from my new observation hive that I've redesigned, and I've got a number 8 hardware cloth here, and it's exactly the size that I need in order to put a feeder jar. And in fact, today I'm actually going to do something you almost never see me do, and that is feed my bees. So why am I doing that? Well, because visually I cannot see that they have much more than maybe a couple tablespoons of honey. Again, I don't know what they've got on that middle frame. There's 5 frames total that I can't see. And I can't see the insides of the outer frames either. So they've got honey, because I could tell by picking it up. But I want to play it safe. And so I'm going to give them a really thick ratio of sugar water just to make sure that they don't starve. And I'm only going to do this every so often. This might be all they get between now and when the weather starts warming up on a more regular basis. So all I do is I turn that jar upside down, and I can hear them in there. I can hear them buzzing. I shook the observation hive just a little bit when I put that jar on top, and you could hear them buzzing inside. And there's a good cluster right at the top, right where that screen is. So it's really hard to show on the camera, but they're right inside the middle here. And when I not open it up, but when I put that jar up on top and I stood up on a step stool, I could see them. So that's the characteristic of this particular genetic line of bees. Their cluster gets really tiny for the winter, and that's actually a good thing, because that way they don't consume the little bit of honey that they have. And if you remember this colony from spring this year, I didn't think they were going to get big enough to cast swarms, but they did. And the population just exploded in a very short time. So we'll come back again later this spring, and we'll see that you'll have more bees visible on the outside, walking around in the glass, and you'll have bees top to bottom probably by April. So if you've been thinking about how you can enjoy beekeeping year-round, this is by far one of the best ways to do it, having an observation beehive in your house. You don't have to punch holes in your walls. You can actually do just a simple window setup like I did here. Just make sure that it's in an area where everybody agrees that it's okay to do. So you husbands, check with your wife just to make sure you're not going to put the bees in an area where, you know, maybe she's not too crazy about. Now, if you check out my last video on the observation beehive, I pretty much give you the Reader's Digest version of how I put one of these together. But I've made some improvements to the new design that I want to show you really quick here. So one of the things that I've noticed, and I've done these two different ways, I've actually made observation beehives that have a door with hinges that just opens and closes, and I stopped doing that design. The bees, what they'll do is they will jam propolis into every crack and crevice that they can find. And so what they were starting to do is towards the tops, in the bottom corners of the door, they were starting to push it open by jamming that propolis in there. And eventually they would make an opening where 1 or 2 bees would start getting out, and then 3 or 4 bees were getting out, so on and so on. So I wound up having to put screws in. I had to scrape the propolis, put screws in just to keep them from pushing that door open with the propolis. Well, they did the same thing to me with the top. Okay, I got the top on hinges as well. They wound up jamming propolis on the other side without the hinges, and they lifted the top up just a little bit, and a bee can get out of a 1/4 inch space. So that's one of the things they did there. And then I stopped using the door, and what I was doing was I would screw the plexiglass directly onto the wood. Once again, I found that if you don't have screws spaced maybe every 4 inches, the bees will do the exact same thing. And you can see, if you look towards the top here, they've put propolis up in here. And again, that glass is starting to bow out. Okay, so what did I do to improve that? Well, the new design, I'm going to show you over here. Let me take you to the new one. So my new design, actually, there's no hinge doors, and I don't screw the plexiglass directly into the wood, but my new design has a 1/8 inch groove cut all the way around, so that all you have to do is go to Home Depot and get yourself a piece of 20 by 32 inch plexiglass, and this is a standard size that you don't have to cut. All you do is go in the store, take it off the shelf. You just need 2 sheets, and then when you get the observation beehive kit, you just take that plexiglass and you drop it right in, just like that. And I've engineered the top the same way. So the top has these 1/8 inch grooves in it. So I take my top and I just find the plexiglass and I slide it right there. And I actually recommend that you screw the top down all the way around. And don't worry about if you have to get in there, because observation beehives are the kind of tool, it's a learning tool. You're really not in here all the time. And if you have to get in there, it's not that big a deal to take the screws out. And I wanted a design that was very, very simple. So that's what I'm really excited about with this particular design, because now the bees can't push that glass out of here. And that was the one thing that I kept running into when they would start to propolize. So that groove should keep everything locked into place, and they won't be able to bend it out of the groove. So if you're thinking about having one of these in your home, I do recommend you look into this one. This is available on my website, enjoybeekeeping.com. So if you want to learn more about keeping bees in an observation beehive, you can check out my learning channel in the links below. You can get the whole course if you want to, or if you just want to learn about how do I keep bees in an observation beehive, I've got a whole program that I'm putting together right now. So if you take a look for it now and you don't see it, it's going to be up there very soon. I'm actually working on that video right now about all the ins and outs about having an observation beehive, where to set it up, how to get bees in, how to take bees out, what to do if your queen dies and you need to requeen, what's the best way to put bees in. Should I use a nuke or should I use a package? You can actually use both, and I show you how to do that in the video. So there's so many benefits, again, to having an observation beehive of your very own. Because for you guys that like beekeeping, it's like we can't get enough of it, right? Every time spring comes, we're in our glory. We're outside, we're watching our bees coming in and out of our beehives. And when we get to do inspections or make splits or harvest honey, that's like, you know, a level 10 on a beekeeping day, right? But all winter long, a lot of us get, you know, the beekeeping blues, and we don't have anything we can really do except fantasize about how nice it's going to be when spring comes again. Well, now if you have an observation beehive in your workshop, in your hobby room, if you decide to put one in your living space, that's perfectly fine too. They're the best conversation piece you could ever have. But you'll be able to kind of scratch that itch when it comes to wanting to see what the bees are up to and what you can learn from them. So they're going to give you the first telltale signs of spring when you see that pollen coming in and out every day. You might look around and not see anything, but the bees are finding it. This is a great way to expand your beekeeping knowledge. The things that I've seen the bees do in here, you'll be able to see things that you would not normally see. I've been able to watch them swarm, and yes, they do swarm when they're in observation beehives. You don't have to panic about that, and I talk about why in that beekeeping management course about how to take care of an observation beehive. So I've been able to witness swarms cast. You'll also see bees being reared in all different stages. You'll see the queen walking around, and it's really a treat when you see her walking around on the combs, laying eggs, and the attendant bees just following her around, making sure she's fed, making sure she's groomed, and she has everything she needs to keep being that egg-laying machine that she is, mother to all the bees in the colony. So friends, visit enjoybeekeeping.com. If you'd like to order one of these kits, you can order one and have it shipped right to you. I'm only shipping in the lower 48 states in the USA at this time. So depending on how well these become, you know, popular, it's all up to you. So if you guys want to get into this, this is an excellent way to learn more about beekeeping, and it's an easy kit to put together. It literally takes 20 to 30 minutes tops, and you'll be on your way to a new adventure in beekeeping that you never thought possible with the things that you'd be able to see every time you look inside the window. Another thing I get asked about real quick, I'll just cover. You could use glass instead of plexiglass. I use plexiglass in mine, and the reason why I do it is because if it gets dirty, I can just pull the sheets out and replace them. And truthfully, you know, it's you could get glass and you could clean that glass maybe with some vinegar and a razor blade, because they'll booger it up on you. They'll put all that propolis up and down, and they'll even start drawing some little bit of crazy comb on there. And if you look at mine here, now this is about, I think I've not replaced this glass on this particular hive in like 5 years. So that's about 5 years worth of bee activity, and I've never replaced the glass. And you can see that they've really started their own construction project on that glass, but it's not enough where it really takes away from watching and appreciating what they're doing. You can still get a pretty good show on what the bees are doing. So if I decide I want to get that, if I want to have a clearer view, all I need to do is just pull that plexiglass off and put a new piece on. Believe it or not, the bees really don't go flying all over the place when you pull the glass. So they stay put pretty good. A few of them fly out just like in a normal inspection, but it's not that big a deal. But again, I cover all that in the how to manage and operate your own observation beehive. So I'm kind of blasting through some of this stuff kind of quick, but just to assure you that I've got a whole course dedicated to the ownership and maintenance of one of these observation beehives. If you're thinking about buying one, but you still maybe have a few questions that I haven't touched on in my videos, shoot an email over to me. That's enjoybeekeeping@gmail.com. Well, friends, it's been a pleasure. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you in the next video. In the meantime, enjoy beekeeping.